This is Censor Studio speaking with sadness. Some of you watching this video likely hold negative views towards China. According to The Diplomat, a leading American diplomatic media outlet, an international research team including the Central Eurasia Research Institute conducted a public opinion survey. It was found that 81% of Koreans have a negative view of China. This is around 10% higher than Japan's 69% anti-China sentiment, a considerably high number. But what's interesting is that until 2015, only 37% of Koreans viewed China negatively, so it seems that anti-China sentiment has grown rapidly in recent years. Today, I want to examine why Korea dislikes China. Surprisingly, more people dislike China than I anticipated. If you haven't subscribed yet and dislike China, please hit the subscribe button. I'd really appreciate it. Korea and China are the closest countries geographically, yet they harbor the most mutual resentment towards each other. Actually, even just 10 years ago, the image we had of China was mostly like the neighborhood fool. It's understandable, as Korea benefited greatly from China's rapid economic growth. Back then, China was hardly perceived as a potential enemy like it is now, so there were many friendly images. On internet communities, China was frequently depicted as a somewhat oblivious neighbor, such as in the Continental Something Something series. However, anti-China sentiment in Korea has intensified over time, evolving from mere sentiment to genuine hatred towards China. People are now often criticized simply for being Chinese. The timing of the shift in Korean society's perceptions of Korea-China relations began in 2016, marking a significant turning point. The decision to deploy the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense system was made. The start of that year was relatively peaceful. In fact, even just a year before 2016 and 2015, Koreans' perception of China was quite favorable. According to a Korea research survey, Koreans' favorability toward China was second only to the United States at the time. This was expected given the economic reliance, active people-to-people interactions, and potential in China's fast-growing market. China's swift economic growth was benefiting Korea in multiple sectors, and the cooperative atmosphere between the nations remained stable. However, the situation started changing rapidly from February 2016. This was when reports began that South Korea and the United States were discussing deploying Terminal High Altitude Area Defense to respond to North Korea's nuclear missile threat. At the time, there was controversy within Korean society over the deployment of Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, but the diplomatic repercussions unfolded in a much more intense direction than the internal conflict within Korea. It was China's strong opposition. The Chinese government stressed that the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense system wasn't just a defense against North Korea, but a risk that could expose China's mainland strategic military assets to the United States. China saw this as a security threat because the X-band radar, a key part of Terminal High Altitude Area Defense, could monitor their military bases and missile launch sites. But what about South Korea, which determined deploying Terminal High Altitude Area Defense would better serve its national interests? On July 8, 2016, South Korea and the United States officially decided to deploy Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. This announcement was not just a simple diplomatic conflict, but an event that fundamentally shook the relationship between the two countries. China reacted with extreme sensitivity and toughness to the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense deployment announcement. They went beyond expressing regret or diplomatic protests, taking blatant pressure and retaliatory measures. A prominent example is the unofficial economic retaliation called Retaliation. The Chinese government began to put full-scale pressure on Korea, making the remarkable statement that a small country should not go against a big country. Retaliation's talk was swiftly followed by tangible economic actions, reflecting a comprehensive reality. They took measures like banning Korean celebrities from Chinese broadcasts, prohibiting Korean dramas and content in China, and delaying customs for Korean cosmetics and food products to maximize damage to Korean companies. Since these measures were essentially unofficial sanctions, it was difficult to see them as a clear violation of international trade rules, and although the Korean government made official statements, it was not in a position to respond strongly. Crucially, China's economic retaliation targeted sensitive Korean consumer sectors like K-wave content, tourism, food, and cosmetics, amplifying the impact. The economic retaliation measures directly impacted areas of Korean people's daily lives. Korean society rapidly shifted to collectively view China not as an ally, but as a threatening nation. From 2016 to 2017, China's emotional and heavy-handed response, coupled with economic retaliation targeting civilian consumption, transformed a diplomatic dispute with Korea into a pivotal moment that altered the sentiments and views of a whole generation. Surpassing domestic politics, ideology, and age, the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense incident became a decisive event that spread distrust and hatred toward China, and is still seen as the starting point of irreparable distrust in Korea-China relations. In October 2017, the two countries reached an agreement regarding the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense deployment conflict. In December 2017, former President Moon Jae-in visited China for a Korea-China summit to normalize relations between the two nations at the government level. However, public favorability toward China kept declining. In 2018 and 2019, public favorability toward China remained low, and Korea became a country that truly dislikes China. The Defense Strategic Dialogue resumed in October 2019 after a 5-year hiatus. That same month, Li Keqiang visited the Samsung factory in China. In December 2019, Wang Yi, the foreign minister, visited Korea and held a Korea-China-Japan summit, but favorability remained low. This is because, despite both governments' efforts to improve relations, the absence of significant progress and continued hardline remarks by high-ranking Chinese officials toward Korea left the public's negative perception of China unchanged. As China's actions gained more attention, they were constantly reproduced on YouTube and in media, leading to an increase in content criticizing China. This factor also seems to have played a significant role in the rise of anti-China sentiment. From January 2020, as COVID-19 spread globally and controversies emerged over its Chinese origin, coupled with travel restrictions between the nations, negative views of China further increased. From 2020 controversies over Chinese capital and Korean content, and debates over hanbok and kimchi's origins persisted, fueling negative sentiment toward China. Interestingly, these cultural conflicts were led not by the government, but by the little pink generation, who grew up with the patriotic education promoted since 1994. As they spark debates over Korean culture, the conflict intensifies further. A 2023 East Asia Institute survey revealed that China's coercive actions, like Terminal High Altitude Area Defense Retaliation, were the top reason for negative perceptions of China. And the second most common reason was that China does not respect Korea. Usually, when countries with a negative perception of China are asked why they dislike China, they typically say it's because of the military threat. Seeing that Korea specifically points to coercive behavior, it can be analyzed that China's past actions have led to the current anti-China sentiment. Given China's damage to Korea's national pride, high-handed diplomacy, actions of officials, and economic sanctions, it's understandable that Koreans view China unfavorably. Anti-China sentiment in Korea appears likely to intensify going forward. 40% of people in their 20s and 30s view China as an enemy. This figure is relatively high compared to other age groups, which are around 20%. While conservatives show the highest hostility toward China, over 65% of progressives and moderates also express hostility. Since all groups dislike China regardless of ideology, generation, or gender, this negative perception is likely to persist for a long time. The rise in anti-China sentiment is likely to continue unless China takes proactive steps and shows gestures of reconciliation first. And if China does not lift some of the economic retaliatory measures it is still enforcing, this trend will probably keep rising. 2021 was a symbolic year for South Korea's perception of foreign countries. That's because it was the first year when South Koreans' favorability toward Japan surpassed their favorability toward China. This phenomenon means more than just a simple change in numbers. Perceptions of China have now surpassed Japan as the most negative, despite Japan's long-standing negative image due to its colonial past. This is not just an emotional reaction, but a result of accumulated disappointment and a sense of crisis. Especially since 2022, this deterioration in public perception has started to appear in a much more pronounced form. Koreans now view China with feelings of threat and hostility beyond mere dislike. In Korean society, China is now seen as a threatening country similar to North Korea and Russia. North Korea has been a symbol of military provocations and nuclear threats since the Korean War, while Russia is known globally as a military aggressor following its 2022 invasion of Ukraine. China being assessed as negatively as these two nations indicates how severely Korean sentiment towards China has worsened. Koreans have gone beyond simply disliking China. They now see it as a country that threatens us, an untrustworthy partner, and even as an entity that infringes on our sovereignty and security. There are clear reasons behind these feelings. China's expansionist moves will likely lead to significant negative public opinion about the country in the future. Recently, China has been showing moves to claim the West Sea as its own. Even just looking at this trend, it's not going to be easy for public opinion about China to improve. If China doesn't work to regain trust and continues its current coercive diplomacy, maritime expansionism, and interfering attitude, public favorability will likely continue declining. What are your thoughts on China? Share them in the comments below. Thanks for watching. This is Kim Song-hyun from MBC News.